Good afternoon, class. I thought I'd give a brief lecture for this week. Basically, we're looking at um, preparing for the business letter punctuation quiz, which is going to be quiz 4 that's due this Sunday. If you looked at the videos for last week, we talked about the next essay, essay 3, which is the persuasive and argumentative essay. I still have some essay 2s to grade, which those grades should be coming in soon. I have graded some already, so just keep mindful of the grades. Midterm grades go in about 2 weeks, so just make sure that you have a C or higher as we head into the midterm aspect of the course. But I'm going to share the screen here about this, which is going to be similar to what you have on your actual quiz. It's basically a study guide. Um, so we're going to look at that. And as you can tell, I've already sort of highlighted some areas just to make it sort of quick and brief. Um, the quiz that you're going to have will not have any highlighted areas. So if you read the chapters or the sections in your e-text, it talks a little bit more about the punctuation marks that you may need to use in this particular formal business letter. You know, the periods, the commas, the semicolons, the dashes, basic punctuation marks. You may want to also double check to make sure that um, there's no misspellings. I didn't put any misspellings in this particular um, example, but there could be some misspelled words on your particular quiz. So if you look here, we have this business letter, and the first thing that is sort of highlighted is the 16th of February. So what's going on there is because you have a date and a year, you need a comma after or in between the date and the year. So I'm going to put that comma there. And that would be, well, that would be the only thing that you would need to do for that particular area is to put the comma. Now, if you look down below where it says, Dear Mr. Lopez, there's actually two things going on. Because this is really a formal business letter. You might have seen it with a comma after the name, which that's okay if it's a little bit more informal, meaning maybe you know the person, it's a colleague, but in this case, we're going to assume that we don't know Mr. Lopez on a day-to-day basis. So what you're going to need to do there is put a colon, the two dots, and the other thing that we're going to need, as you can tell, grammar check is sort of our friend. We need a period after the Mr. So a period and a colon is basically what you need in this particular part. And then you can sort of move on from there. Nothing else is needed. So a comma, you need to have between the date and the year. And then, Mr. or Mrs. or Miss, if you're abbreviating some of those, you need a period. And then you need to introduce the actual business letter more professionally and formal with a colon. So again, if you look at the first line, sort of like up here with the 16, we definitely need the comma after the date. But notice too, because we continue with this sentence, you also need to have a comma after the year in this case. And the reason is, like I said, because you continue with the sentence. If you ended the sentence with 2009, then you would just need a period. But since we are continuing the sentence, we need a comma after the year in this case. If we look down at the second sentence, when you ordered your new Whoosh vacuum, you requested a set of attachments as well. If you look, this is a classic example going back to learning about comma splices, run-ons, and fragments. What you basically have here is a fragment. because you have an independent clause or a dependent clause right here, meaning it can't stand on its own. So you can't put a period there. You can't use a semicolon. You can't use a colon because what really comes after this is independent, meaning it can stand on its own. But what you need to do to be able to separate the two is you need a comma. And then when you do the comma, you won't have any issues with it being a fragment. If we go on to the third sentence, we do have the vacuum that you want in stock. Unfortunately, our company has sold out of the specific set of attachments that you've ordered. I highlighted unfortunately because it's one of those transitional words. Remember, if you use a transitional word like unfortunately, however, in addition, at the beginning of the sentence, you usually need a comma after the word. But because we're using it in the middle of the sentence, you really need to punctuate it with a semicolon first and then a comma after the actual word. Because that really, it combines the two sentences together without creating a comma splice or a particular run-on, because what's really going on right now is you're creating a run-on sentence. So you have to punctuate it with a semicolon before the word and then a comma after the word. Same thing with however in the next sentence. It's still acting as a transitional word in the middle of the sentence. So again, you need to have a semicolon before however and a comma after it. And that will solve that issue as it relates to punctuation. If we go to the next sentence, if you like, our company would be happy to send you another or a different vacuum whoosh model 1234, which comes with a set of attachments and its purchase price. So here we got a couple things going on. Like the second sentence, when we begin when we have a dependent clause. So that's why I sort of highlighted the like, because you need a, again, just like here, we need another comma. Because what we got going on is a dependent clause blending in with a independent clause. And then here, because we have which is a relative clause, you basically need a comma before whoosh. And since we're using which, you need a comma before which. And that would solve that issue. Because technically you could take everything that's inside those commas out and it still makes sense. But the deal is it's descriptive because it's talking about the particular model and the product. So that's why you need the two commas separating the model and the product. If you look at the next sentence, Mr. Lopez, again, there's a couple things going on. One, we do need the period. Again, like we needed earlier. And then Mr. Lopez, you can kind of hear that pause. In this case, we do need the comma. Because you're talking about a particular customer in this case, and it's Mr. Lopez. If we go through the sentence, if you look, I highlighted and. The reason why I did that, because really everything before and is a complete thought. Everything after and is a complete thought. When you use a fanboy or a coordinating conjunction, which and is a part of, and you have two complete sentences like this, we need to put a comma in before and, so you're not creating sort of a run-on sentence for yourself. The next sentence where it says the price is a little higher, but is still an excellent value. If there is a satisfactory substitution, please send the attached postcard to my office at 3434 Smith Street, Samora, California, 91342 as soon as possible. So as you can tell, there's a couple things going on. Here again, we have an if clause, just like we had earlier. It's a dependent clause, meaning it can't stand on its own. It needs something that's independent. So a comma is needed at some point in the sentence. It comes after substitution because where it starts with please, that is really our complete thought, our independent clause. So we need to put a comma there. And if you look, we need to put a comma separating the street name the city or the town. We need a comma in between that and the state. And we also need a comma after the zip code in this case, since we continue with the sentence here. After that, we have it completes itself, the period at the end, and that's all you have to do. The next little section, again, we need to really have commas after hope, because it's one of those that's a non-restrictive clause. You can basically take it out and it still makes sense, but we're trying to reassure Mr. Lopez here, at least the person writing this letter, Susan Polk, is trying to reassure Mr. Lopez that he's going to get the correct model and all that stuff. So we need a comma after hope, and we also need a comma before that. But we also need another period after Mr. And that will sort of solve our issues with the punctuation as it relates to early on in here. If you look at our last sentence, thank you for the patronage. We hope to serve you in the future. You got a classic example of a run-on sentence. Really easy fix is just to put the semicolon and call it a day. And then at the end, sincerely, you need a comma. And of course, you close with the person's name. And that's pretty much it. Now, of course, your business letter is going to be a different business letter, but it's going to be the same sort of process. You're going to have to include the punctuation marks where they need to go. And as you noticed, I didn't change any of the sentences. The only thing I'm doing is put the punctuation marks in, the ones that need to go. So on your particular business letter, you don't necessarily have to change sentences around. Just note how to use your punctuation marks, which again, this really should be a review because you learned about commas and semicolons and periods and stuff, second, third, fourth grade, middle school, maybe a little bit in high school. But if you need a refresher, there's page numbers I left for you to review in your e-text. You can always do a Google search for punctuation for additional information about it. But for the most part, I hope quiz 4 is a little easier than the last 3 quizzes for you. So I hope that was helpful as it relates to a study guide for the quiz that is due this Sunday. Quiz 5, which will be coming up in about another week, really is sort of a comprehensive review of all the grammar that we learned over the last 7 weeks. It's going to be 10 questions. It's going to be sort of a multiple choice type deal. And I'll give you a little bit more information on that next week. Just continue to work on your essay 3, which will be coming up due if we look at our actual assignment checklist. We can get a better understanding on when that's going to be due here. So if you look, here's our checklist. I also have the reading list to sort of go from week to week. So quiz 4 is due this Sunday. Quiz 5 will be due on the 27th. So if you look, 20th, quiz 4, quiz 5 the 27th. Essay 3 is due on the 6th. And then we have a really short of, it's going to be a shorter essay, I guess. and we will talk a little bit more about this in detail. Essay 4 is going to be a process essay. And as you can tell, it's a little, it's a short period um, between the 6th and the 13th. But again, I'll talk a little bit more about essay 4. It shouldn't be, I hope, that challenging of a deal as long as you follow the instructions when we start talking about essay 4 here in about another week or so. And then we get into um, the actual research aspect of the course with the proposals, the annotated bibs, the research paper, the final exam. And if you look after quiz 5, there's a big gap before we get the final quiz, which deals with MLA documentation, paraphrasing, summarizing, works cited page, stuff that you're going to need to be able to do and know as it relates to the research paper. So quiz 6 is our last quiz. We got 2 more before that. One due this Sunday, of course, one due the following Sunday. Then essay 3 is due after quiz 5 the following Sunday, and then essay 4. And then we have a little bit of a gap as it relates to our last quiz. But as we get closer into the research aspect of the course, we're probably going to have a library orientation. It's going to be a virtual one with our embedded library, Lorna. I don't know if you noticed, but she's been posting videos that talk a little bit more about the library. Galileo, she's going to be posting some about how to cite sources and that type deal. But the week of March 6th is basically, well, actually, I think it's the week of March 1st would be when midterm grades go back out. So it'd be sort of like your second checkpoint. And that's going to be the one that's going to be the most important, really, as it relates to, besides the final checkpoint, which would be May 5th. That's when I send final grades to college. But if you have a 69 or lower, come March 3rd, because I believe that's when I have to send the midterm grades to the college, you may want to do a little bit of soul searching. Depending on how low your D is, there's still a possibility you can bring that up. If you have a really low F, 20, 30, 40, that might be a difficult challenge because really the last half of the class, the weights of grades are a little bit more greater than they are the first half. And really in any class, you kind of want to do well the first 8 weeks because those grades sort of dictate, the first 64 days of your semester. Those grades matter too. But if you don't sort of head into midterm with strong grades, meaning strong A's and B's, sometimes it can be hard to pull your grade up just because the last 7 weeks is really going to be, it's going to be busy. The grade, like I said, the weights are going to be a little bit heavier, so you can't really afford to get anything lower than what your average is. So let's say you have an 80 in the class and you want to try to get the A or at least a higher B, then you're going to have to make 81 or higher on everything from that point on. If you start making 79, 78, 68, 48, it's gonna knock you out of the B range and possibly stop you from being able to even get a low A in the class. So that's why I say be conscientious about your grades heading forward, especially if you need this class to be able to get into another class, because nobody wants to have to repeat a class, because that will set your graduation date back a little bit, and it's just it's a pain, because if you're on financial aid or something, you're going to take a hit there. You could be on academic probation, meaning you may not get the HOPE grant for a couple semesters until you pull your GPA back up. So just be mindful of that. If you need any help, please email me. If you have any drafts of SA3, please send those. Use Smart Thinking. Smart Thinking is free. Check your emails because I did send out some information about that early on. So if you didn't use Smart Thinking for SA1 or SA2, I definitely probably would try to use it for the remaining essays in the class. And I hope everybody has a wonderful rest of week 6. Week 7 information will be up directly as it relates to the folder. So I hope to be able to record a lecture for next week. And just let me know, like I said, if you need help with anything, I can't read minds, so you're going to have to reach out. Again, I hope everybody has a great rest of the week, a great weekend, and I will see you all next week.